Well, thanks for joining us today. My name is Charles with TaxBandits. We've got a special guest with us today, one of our favorite CPAs, Mr. Jason Ackerman. Thanks for being with us today, Jason. How are you?
One of your favorites or your favorite?
My father-in-law is a CPA, so I can't say you're my favorite, but you're definitely in the top tier.
That's fair. Don't get yourself divorced.
No. So we're filming this today remotely, obviously. As you can see, we're doing this in the height of the COVID-19 coronavirus pandemic. And we'd like to talk a little bit about some of the tax incentives, tax programs that the government has recently put in place that businesses may be able to take advantage of. The most popular of which being the Payroll Protection Program, the PPP, as everyone's referred to. It's been in the news quite a lot recently. Initially, it was approved for, what was it, $290 billion?
The first round was 349, I think. 349. That included the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster loan, too. And that lasted about 2 weeks, and it dried up. And now they're going to pass probably tomorrow, which is Thursday, the 23rd, another, I think it was 400 billion.
Wow.
A lot of money.
Yeah, a lot of money. And at the time of this right now, it looks like they've reached a deal to extend that. Although it may not be enough from what I'm seeing. I mean, I've seen estimates saying that it really might need up to $1 trillion to really fully fund everything.
It's hard to know, but I will say that you need to be ready. If you missed out on the first round of funding, you need to be ready to go on this next round. If we just back up for a second and kind of go over everything that happened. So basically, the first thing that passed kind of immediately was the emergency family sick leave. That was kind of the coronavirus bill 1, and that basically allowed you to pay your employees 10 days worth of emergency sick leave, and you would get that 100% refunded. For the most part, there's a few little caveats, like if they're making over a certain amount, they don't get it, but that's basically the general rule. And then after that, they can go on emergency family sick leave, which was already a government program, and that you'll get refunded too. So that was kind of the first thing that happened, kind of to allow companies to immediately pay their employees so they could stay on payroll. The whole idea of this was, obviously the country shut down pretty much immediately, and we wanted to keep paying people. So what they're trying to do is just give companies a reason to keep paying people. So that was kind of the first thing. And then they realized, okay, that's not going to be enough. We need to give more. So they came out with the PPP, the Payroll Protection Program, and then they came out with the Economic Injury Disaster Loan Program. And the way it was originally titled in the bill, and you also have to remember that it was a $2 trillion bill to start everything. That's the largest bill in American history. Normally, if it's a bill that big, like, it's years of debate. This all happened in like a 3-day period, and it was a 900+ page bill that they had to write. So it was not perfect in any way, and there really wasn't a lot of checking to make sure everything was right. And that's pretty typical with the bill. So the way it normally works, a bill passes, and then it goes to the different departments, the IRS, Department of Labor, the Treasury, to issue guidance. And normally they issue guidance, and they have months to issue guidance so they can go through it. Well, they only had basically 2 days to issue guidance on this. So it's kind of been a little mess, and we still don't have a lot of guidance on what's the ultimate payback of some of these loans and how you get them. But when the bill was originally written, it was kind of, you either got $10,000 under the EIDL, Economic Injury Disaster Loan, or you could apply for the PPP, which could be more. And if you were a very small business and you didn't think you'd get more than $10,000 with the PPP loan, it was better for you to do the EIDL. Well, they basically decided that the EIDL was too many people were applying for it. It was going to run out of money. So they basically said, you only get $1,000 per employee up to 10. So up to $10,000 for the EIDL. So most businesses who were applying, they had 1 or 2 employees. They were only getting $2,000. So it's almost always better now for you to apply for the PPP loan. So that's what we're advising all of our clients to do, is to apply for the PPP loan. The way the PPP loan works, it's designed, it's the payroll protection program. So the whole idea of it is you maintain your employees. They're giving you money to use for payroll to maintain your employees. If you do that, it'll be forgiven. So the basic calculation of what you get, you take your payroll for 2019. It can be for other dates depending upon when you started business, but in general, it's 2019. You take your payroll, you divide it by 12, that's your monthly payroll costs, and you times it by 2.5, and that's your payroll protection program amount. You can also add health insurance if you offer health insurance, retirement, state and local taxes. That all goes into the calculation. It's a pretty, it can be a complex calculation to do. But in general, that's how it's done. And you get your PPP amount. And as long as you use that for payroll over the 8 weeks from once you get the loan, that loan will be forgiven. Now, the biggest question that we have as of this date are the exact rules on the forgiveness part. So we know that 75% has to be used for payroll, and 25% of that can be used for utilities, rent, interest payments, health insurance, but that's all we know. We don't know the details on the payroll. So what I've been telling clients is you don't want to go spend this money willy-nilly, obviously. And if you're not sure if you're going to even qualify for the forgiveness, it's still a good idea for you to get the money, because worst case, you just have to pay it back in 8 weeks. So I would still go and apply for the PPP money. Keep it in a separate account. You know, if you're using it for payroll, that's going to get forgiven. But if you've laid off of your employees or you're not quite sure, just keep it in a separate account. And then as we know more information, you'll know how much will be forgiven. What you don't want to do is spend it all and then you have to pay it back and you don't have that money.
Right.
So
now you've helped a number of clients through this already. What has the process been like for you? Is it, have you seen some people actually come through and get this funding at this point, or is it still in the middle stages?
So at this point, if you got in the first round of funding, you probably have gotten the money. So in order to get to the PPP, you have to go through a bank that deals with the SBA. So it's an SBA loan that can be forgiven, has to go through a bank. So you have to go through your local bank to get the loan. If you don't have a local bank or that bank is not accepting PPP applications, then there are online options that you can go through. Lendio is a big one. Your payroll company might be offering a connection with an SBA lender, but you have to go through a bank. It was initially complete chaos because everyone thought the money was going to get run out. There was no detail on how the calculation was done. So the first couple of days were pretty crazy. We now have a pretty good idea of how the calculation works on the PPP amount. So that's pretty standard. What's not standard between the banks is exactly what they're asking for. Some ask for a tax return. Some ask for additional documents that aren't necessarily required by the SBA, but the bank might need. So what you absolutely have to have, you have to have your payroll reports, which is your 941s and your 940s. You have to have some calculation showing how you came up with your monthly payroll costs. And you have to show some proof that you were open in business by February 15, 2020. So that's basically all that the SBA is requiring. Banks are requiring other things too to prove everything. So the way this whole thing's working is the banks are basically doing all the approving. The SBA is just on the back end, like they're relying on the banks to verify all the data and make sure you qualify. It's going to be the same on the back end with the forgiveness part. So the banks want to make sure that they're not doing anything wrong. So they might be asking for some more information. If you're you can also qualify if you don't have payroll, if you're an independent contractor. So if you're a Schedule C business, meaning you're a sole proprietor, you just file a Schedule C on your individual tax return, you also qualify for this PPP. And in order for you to get that, you have to supply your Schedule C for 2019, even if your 2019 tax return isn't ready. So if you haven't done your 2019 tax return, that's okay, but you need to do your 2019 Schedule C. The banks will accept that as a draft, but you have to have that in order to get the PPP funding.
All right. Sounds good. And on the forgiveness aspect of it, is it the entire thing will be forgiven as long as 75% of it is being spent on payroll? Or only the payroll part is going to be forgiven? Is that part is unclear?
It's unclear, but it's unclear exactly what the details are unclear. But yes, you will get everything forgiven as long as you use the funds in the appropriate manner. So yeah, you can get 100% of it forgiven. All we know right now for that formula is 75% has to be used for payroll, and 25% can be used for utility, rent, mortgage interest, and health insurance. But we don't know the details on that. And there's also going to be some requirement on the amount on employee retention. So you're not going to be able, if you had 50 employees, to lay them all off and pay yourself a bonus and use that as 75% of what you get. Like, that's not the idea of this. The whole point of this loan was to keep your employees.
Yeah.
So there's going to be some sort of calculation on the amount of employees you have to keep, but we're just unsure of that calculation as of this time.
There's been a lot of talk of certain larger businesses that you might not consider to be small businesses getting this deal. I know a lot was made of Shake Shack actually qualified for it, and they agreed to give it back to the government. Any big thoughts on that? I mean, as far as the application process goes, as long as you fall within the threshold, you're legally able to qualify for this, right?
Yeah. So the rule is you have to have 500 or less employees. They made an exemption for hospitality and restaurants. So if it was per location for that. So if you had a franchise like Ruth Chris or Shake Shack, where you had over 500 employees, but you only had 50 at each location, then you could apply for this loan. That I don't know if that was the right move or not, but you can definitely tell that the people who got the PPP at the beginning were the bigger companies who had connections with the bank, who they made sure that the application got through early. So that's why I think this funding is going to last a little bit longer on this back end. I still think it's going to go pretty quick, but I think if you look at this first funding that lasted basically a week and a half, 2 weeks, it was everything, all the big companies that knew they qualified got in early, and that took up a lot of the money.
Yeah. Well, sounds like a good program. Hopefully it's going to be able to continue. Hopefully it won't dry out as soon as the next one hits.
Yeah. It's the craziest thing that's happened in the accounting, or the government's basically giving you money and it's not based on income.
Yeah.
Or if you have the ability to borrow money. It's literally based on, do you have payroll? So right. I don't think we're ever going to see anything like this again in our lifetimes.
Yeah, the big confusing thing to me was the fact that as long as you were a certain size, you qualified for it. Because obviously most businesses are suffering right now, but not all are. I mean, some could be doing well during this time, and that doesn't seem to be a qualifier. So even if it's not affecting you, you could still benefit from this.
Yeah, there is a question on there that says, have you suffered some sort of thing? But basically, everyone has suffered through this thing.
Right.
So
yeah.
Everyone's business has been impacted in some way. So everyone's going to get it as long as they have the payroll that qualifies.
Gotcha. All right. And you talked about emergency sick leave and emergency FMLA a little bit earlier. Would you mind expanding a little bit on that? So this is another option for people that are either sick, they have employees who are sick, or they have to take care of someone who is sick. And it's a way of the government essentially refunding people for this sick leave program through their normal payroll. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct. So the one big thing about the PPP is if you're paying your employees through the sick leave and you're getting that refunded, that doesn't count as payroll under the PPP. So you can't do both. So if you haven't gotten your PPP money yet, which is probably a lot of you, then you can do the emergency sick leave, but you just have to make sure that once you get the PPP money that you stop the emergency sick leave or family leave, because then that won't count as, you won't be able to get that part forgiven, and you don't want that to happen. It's still unclear exactly how everything's going to work as far as you getting the money repaid. Right now, it's all going through payroll, and basically you'll get it refunded on your quarterly payroll reports. They do have another form, which is the 7200, which you can get it faster, but it's unclear how fast you're going to get that money back. So it's still kind of all a little bit up in the air, but you will get that money eventually. So what I would say for some advice is, if you're still paying your employees, which at this time, I mean, we've been closed for a month and a half, so you probably have already made the choice either to put them on unemployment, which could honestly be better for them because you get $600 a week for unemployment plus what they would normally get. If you're continuing to pay them and they're not working, the sick leave is an option if you haven't got the PPP, but you should be applying for the PPP because you're going to get more money that way, and it's going to be better for you.
Gotcha. So there's a couple different ways of handling it. So either if you're using a payroll provider such as PayWow or some other online payroll provider, perhaps they're going to help you make those deferrals or take care of that sick leave situation, or you can file the Form 7200 through providers such as TaxBandits, and that can be sent to the IRS directly in order to get the money quicker instead of waiting to file your quarterly.
Yeah,
gotcha.
Exactly. And most of the payroll companies, they're building into their platform so that you designate this is employee sick leave or employee family leave, and then they're kind of handling it all for you in the back end.
Yeah. Perfect. Now, one other available option for people is to defer Social Security. That's a new thing that's never really been done before that I'm aware of. So can you talk a little bit about that option that anybody has, that they can they can defer the employer portion of Social Security for a certain amount of time?
Yeah, so basically, obviously when you pay payroll, you have to pay FICA taxes on your employees. That can now be deferred, but it's not forgiven. So I don't normally think this is a good idea for companies, because if you can't pay it now, you're probably not going to be able to pay it in a year, and you're just deferring. So it's going to make it more complicated for you. But you can do it if you absolutely need to, and that's done via the payroll reports. Most of the payroll companies are building in a question if you want to defer Social Security, and they won't take it out of your check, and they'll report it on the 941 for you.
Gotcha. All right. And there's another retention credit that is out there, the employee retention credit. Now, this is sort of an either or situation, right? You can either go with the PPP or you can go with the employee retention credit.
If you had there's two ways you qualify for it. If you had a 50% reduction in your revenue from the previous year's quarter, or if your business had to shut down because of Corona, and it's unclear exactly. It just says shut down.
Mm-hmm.
I think it has to be mandated by the government. Like the government said, you have to shut down. Like if you're a restaurant or a salon, you can do this. Then you can get a 50%, or you can get a credit. Sorry, it's not a 50%. You can get a credit based on payroll for what you pay your employees now. I haven't done a calculation, where this is better than the PPP, because the PPP you're getting basically 2.5 times monthly payroll, and this you're getting 50% of their payroll over a period of time. So it probably doesn't make a lot of sense for you to go that route. It's probably going to be better for you to do the PPP.
Okay, so go PPP if you can get it. That is, hopefully. What do you think is going to happen? Do you think they're just going to keep extending this thing until the money completely runs out?
It's hard to say, but I would
just make a bold prediction here.
I do think that most companies that qualify will get it, especially those that have put in an application in the next 2 weeks.
Right.
I think if you wait longer than that, you're probably not going to get it. But if you put in, I think eventually, and this is just speculation, but they're going to have a drop dead date that says this is the date, and as long as you get in before that. But that's speculation. I think with this next round of funding, most people will get it if they do it now. So I would just encourage you, don't wait, do it now, but you should get it.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you for that. I appreciate the subjective forecasting, as it is, for what it's worth. Totally subjective, not factual at all, but hopefully that's the way it's going to be. Any other thoughts? Anything else you'd like to advise businesses about during this interesting time that we're in?
Well, I think this is a really good. Obviously, businesses had to shut down basically immediately. They didn't have any lead up, and it really shows you that it's important that you have at least 3 months of cash in order to hold your business over. And a lot of businesses, the market's been going up for 10 years in a row. The business environment has been very friendly, but it can change on a dime, and you always have to be prepared for that. And I think we're going to see a bunch of businesses go out of business now because, they were living basically paycheck to paycheck with their business, and you can't do that over a long period of time. So I would just say that if you're struggling now and you get through this, you really need to think about, planning for the next time this happens, because this isn't, this happens basically once every 10 years. If you look, the economic crisis in 2008 happened, this happened. So these things happen, and you have to be ready for it. And the ones that are ready for it, they're the ones that succeed and outlast the storm and then make more money after this.
Yeah. No, yeah, you're right. It totally exposes the reality of whatever your situation is. So if you're on a good foundation, you're probably going to be able to weather this thing. But if you were on a rocky foundation from the beginning, then this is just going to really tear that thing apart. So really appreciate your words on that. And appreciate you taking the time to talk to us today, Jason. It's been a pleasure.
I love TaxBandits. Wish I would have wore my TaxBandits shirt.
Yeah, what the heck? It's all right. For the next marathon, perhaps, whenever that happens. All right.
Exactly.
Well, it's been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and stay safe out there.